In just a few weeks, the 37th annual SummerSlam is taking place in Cleveland, Ohio, and one thing I think we can all agree on is that more often than not, over its almost 40-year history, SummerSlam has always been a pretty consistent show. More often than not, SummerSlam has always been a show that has delivered, sometimes even being better than that year's WrestleMania. When I think of SummerSlam, I instantly think of warm and fuzzy feelings. The classic green logo, the classic stages, the late 2000s and early 2010s when it took place in LA every single year. I think back to good memories. And yeah, I do think back to some years where the show was average, pretty mid, but I'm not gonna lie to you, for me it's hard to look back and think of just some horrible, just like downright dog shit SummerSlam. When it comes to WrestleMania, I can instantly tell you about WrestleMania 27 and the trauma it caused me, but for SummerSlam, it's like, I guess 2012 was pretty weird, but nothing too offensive comes to my mind. So with it being SummerSlam season, I decided that I was gonna go back and watch what are considered the two worst SummerSlams of all time. And little did I know that not only was I gonna go back to the 90s for the first time on this channel, but I was also gonna watch a pay-per-view that I actually ordered as a kid, and spent most of my life thinking it was pretty decent. Apparently not. Well, I watched the two worst SummerSlams of all time, so you didn't have to. Let's get into it. We begin in the 90s with arguably what is widely considered the worst SummerSlam of all time, 1995. 1995 was a disastrous year in the WWF. Diesel was the world champion and nobody gave a shit. Shawn Michaels almost died after getting jumped by a bunch of Marines outside of a bar. Business was downright horrendous. One of the worst WrestleManias ever took place, and this grimace looking mother was the king of the ring. So SummerSlam being bad in 95, makes sense, not really a surprise, but I didn't think it was gonna be this bad. The show starts off and at first it's like, wow, this is pretty awesome. The first match of SummerSlam 95 is a Hakushi versus 123 Kid in a fast-paced banger of a match that you would probably think took place in like 2001 or something on the indie scene. The show starts off with a really good hot match, and you combine that with the cozy, warm, mid-90s aesthetic, it's a pretty good time. See, even though I was negative 3 years old at this point, mid-90s WWF has always had such a soft spot in my heart. It's always had such a cozy vibe, there's like this innocence to the product, everything is so vibrant, it's always just been very comforting to me, and I honestly wish I was a kid during this era, despite how bad it was, but sadly, that does not save the show whatsoever. This show is just filled with the most random matches featuring wrestlers and the most random gimmicks just doing absolutely nothing of value. After the first match, the next 2 hours are bad. No, like, they are really, really bad. You just get whatever matches where nothing important happens. Even just like the big promoted matches, you're just there like, why is this happening? Undertaker takes on Kama in a casket match, the future Godfather. Great, sounds good. Why is this 17 minutes? And wait, why is he trying to pin him? Listen, I love Taker, but mid-90s Taker against wrestlers who couldn't work never worked out well. Who would have guessed? Bret Hart, who was the best wrestler on this roster, right? And either the most or the second most over wrestler in the entire company, had to wrestle a dentist for 16 minutes. A dentist, who, in case you haven't noticed, is Kane, aka Glenn Jacobs, before the CTE got to him. So yeah, for the 2 hours out of the 2 hours and 44 minutes the show takes place, it's pretty bad. But somehow, there's actually a 5-star match on this show? The one saving grace on this show was the fact that Shawn Michaels was ready to die for the industry again on this night and had a ladder match rematch against Razor Ramon, and they just casually dropped a 5-star classic again. Growing up as a wrestling fan, you always hear about WrestleMania 10 and the ladder match between Shawn and Razor, right? That's the iconic match. It's the match in the video games, it's the match they made an action figure about. That is the iconic match. But these two, a year after that match, ran it back and they went nuts. This is a crazy match to watch in 2024 because ladder matches are so different now, right? They're straight stunt shows, everything is set up to have some crazy stunt, but back in the good old days, ladder matches were still just wrestling matches that happened to have ladders in there. All the wrestlers were trying to do were win, and crazy stuff that happened just happened to happen because they were trying to win, if that makes any sense. This was an absolute treat to watch. This is like the 3rd ladder match ever, and it's just them two with 2 ladders, no other weapons, just going off, just doing their thing. It's a pure ladder match with so many callbacks to the first match. The crowd is going crazy, they're hot. This might be the worst SummerSlam ever, but this is a 5-star match, in my opinion, easily. So it's like, hey, if you unfortunately did buy this show back in 95, at least you got this. So I was watching this, I was having the time of my life, it was great, fantastic, 5 out of 5. So then it's like, okay, well, the first match was pretty good, the ladder match is a no doubt classic. Sure, there were 2 hours of whatever in between, but hey, it doesn't sound that bad. Is it really the worst SummerSlam ever? And no, up until here, I had fun watching. Despite all my criticism, it was still cozy, it was still fun, it was still pretty exciting, and we had 2 really, really good matches. The only issue was, they still had the main event. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what is largely responsible for this being considered the worst SummerSlam of all time. The main event for this show over the legendary ladder match was Diesel versus King Mabel for the title. Yes, before Viscera was sexually assaulting the roster in the mid-2000s, he was main eventing SummerSlam in 1995. To this day, it's like, what the hell were they thinking? Why would you do this? Why would anyone think this is a good idea? You don't have to be a scientist to see these two men and be like, yeah, that's probably not gonna work in a wrestling match. But in a time where Vince McMahon was doing everything he could to make Diesel into his new Hulk Hogan, just like how Hulk Hogan made his career being a fat wrestler, it was time for Diesel to do the same. But this was bad. This was really bad. The match starts and nobody in the crowd cares, which makes sense. I mean, when King Mabel did win King of the Ring a few months ago, they were literally chanting ECW when he got crowned. But yo, no joke, 30 seconds into the match, I swear to God, I'm not even joking, Mabel is already tired. Tired from what? Breathing? I don't know. It's Mabel versus Diesel, it's closing SummerSlam 95, and Diesel is just out there trying to do anything he can to make this match special. Just anything he can do. At one point, Diesel dives out of the ring for the industry to try to get anything out of this match. Yes, Kevin Nash, one of the laziest wrestlers I've ever seen in my life, dove out of the ring for this match. How he didn't tear something, I will never know. But hey, don't worry, maybe we'll take care of that. But hey, the point is, Diesel is trying. So what does he get for trying? What does he get for risking his body to try to make this match special? Mabel almost breaks his back. I couldn't believe my eyes, I couldn't believe my ears. Mabel at one point in this match sits on Diesel's back, but ends up sitting a little too low, and you can hear Diesel just cussing off Mabel. Poor Nash, no wonder his body fell apart. He had 500 pounds of Big Mac and large fries on his back.
If you ever talked about sitting down on the job, wow!
This is like one of the stupidest spots I've seen in my life. Why did he do this? What was the point of this? The WWE champion at this point basically has a broken back. He's crippled. Mabel doesn't know what the hell is going on. And the best part about this was Nash literally told Mabel before the match to not sit on his back. And what does he do? The crowd is dead. They don't care about anything that's going on. And remember, this was the main event of the show. We get ref bumps, Lex Luger pulls up, he's here to help Diesel doesn't care, whatever, you know, stuff happens, and SummerSlam 95 goes off the air, and this was the main event. This was a straight up tragedy, and the fact that they actually wanted to do this match, I can't comprehend it. I just don't understand it. Why did they think this could actually work? If it wasn't for the Saudi Arabia disasters of the late 2010s, this might be the worst main event of all time, especially considering the fact that this was a SummerSlam, and this was the main event. A really poor, a really bad time for the company, and as a result, a really bad show. That main event is basically the 90s equivalent of Goldberg versus Undertaker. Thank God HBK and Razor did what they did, but imagine spending money on this back in 95. Imagine asking your mom to pay $30 to watch Mabel versus Diesel. I can't. But hey, I can imagine spending $40 to watch the Great Khali versus Batista. We move on to 12 years later, and ladies and gentlemen, it's the other worst SummerSlam of all time, SummerSlam 2007. This was a trip to look back at because this was actually a show that I ordered back in 2007. So you know what, maybe if my dumbass was alive in 95, I probably would have bought SummerSlam that year. All little 9-year-old Pav wanted for his birthday back in 07 was SummerSlam, and boy did he get it. This was a show that I never watched after it aired. I recorded on VHS after I ordered it, and I never went back to it. And maybe that itself should have told me that this was not a good show, but apparently not, because I legit spent the last 17 years of my life just thinking that this was always a decent show, that I just assumed that this was just a decent SummerSlam. Boy, was I wrong about that one. It's crazy because I was so hyped for this show back in 07. Not only was Cena and Orton gonna main event for the title and they were gonna tear the house down, they were gonna go off, not only was that like one of the biggest matches for me as a kid, Rey Mysterio was back wrestling after 10 months of being away, and if that wasn't enough, Triple H was also back after missing 8 months of action. And yeah. That was about it for the card. But that was enough for me. The crazy part is, I wasn't the only one that got bamboozled because for some reason, this pay-per-view was super successful. This show did more buys than SummerSlam 2008, which took place a year after, and was 10 times a better show. Why the hell did 540,000 people pay to watch this? Ladies and gentlemen, going back and watching this was rough. You would think you were watching a house show from 2007 the way nothing of value actually happens here. The first match to open up SummerSlam, you know, the second biggest show of the year, was Kane versus Finlay. Wow, that's definitely gonna have the crowd going crazy. We had probably seen that match like 900 times on SmackDown in 06 and 07, but alright, here, sure, let's open up SummerSlam with that. But okay, it's fine, whatever, that's not good enough. Okay, the next match was Umaga versus Carlito versus Mr. Kennedy. Which, like, again, it was okay, but really? What the hell happened to the SummerSlam I love? The summer of '07 in the world of pro wrestling was very rough, in case you didn't know. Not only did Chris Benoit go full Chris Benoit, the roster was completely cooked. Half of the roster was suspended for doing steroids, the other half was just straight up injured. Edge was injured, HBK was injured, Bobby Lashley was injured and never came back for like 10 years. Jeff Hardy just went MIA in the summer of '07. It was a very tough time, and as a result, so was the SummerSlam. But that's why the SummerSlam was hyped up in the first place. That's why 540,000 idiots bought this in the first place, because it featured the return of two legends, and those two legends were going to bring so much life back into the product. The first return was the long-awaited return of Rey Mysterio. After being gone for 10 months, Ray was finally going to be back, adding so much life to SmackDown, and I was so excited for this. Like, that was one of the main reasons why I wanted this show. Ray returning meant a lot, and best of all, it meant that he was going to come back and destroy the same person who put him out in the first place. It was going to be awesome, it was going to be fire, it was going to be fun, it was hype, it was exciting, and then Ray actually came out, and Ray, what the is this? Rey Mysterio came back looking like a Monopoly piece. He came back thinking he was a Silver Surfer, and as a result, this is how we saw Ray after not seeing him for 10 months. Why? You know what, to this day, I blame Dominic. I just know that he made his dad watch Fantastic Four with him like a week before this show, and Ray saw it with his son, got all amped up and excited, and as a result, he dressed up like this. Poor Ray makes his long-awaited return to the ring, and by the time he's in the ring, everyone's just there like, what the hell is going on? Even commentary's trying to explain whatever the hell this was. I know it wasn't the biggest deal, but I'm not gonna lie, it just wasn't pretty. It was like, damn, Ray, maybe you should have came back at Unforgiven. Ray just looked straight up disgusting, I'm gonna be honest. Luckily for him though, the paint did wear off, and he looked good in the ring, and I was happy to see him back, but once again, the match was just whatever. Nothing special to write home about, and it was just a little showcase for Ray. And you know what? That's what it was always gonna be. But if any night needed more, it was this one. I remember thinking that this was going to be some crazy match, especially after how dirty Chavo did him in '06. You'd assume Ray's going to come back with a vengeance, we're going to have some fire, crazy match, we're going to tear the house down. It was the same match they had at last year's SummerSlam. And that's where it's like, alright, they got me. They got my $40. After that, it was just downhill. You then get a women's battle royal, which was whatever. CM Punk and John Morrison get to squeeze a 15-minute match into 5 minutes, and before you know it, there's only 3 matches left, and most of the time is going to be spent on Triple H's entrance. And that's where the depression hits you when you're a grown-up and not a 9-year-old who's just excited to watch a pay-per-view live. Because by the time Triple H makes his return, does his grand entrance, and the hype wears down, it kind of hits you that he's just here to beat King Booker as fast as possible and get the hell out of there. This was literally SummerSlam, the house show, and the match is 5 minutes long. Great, what an amazing return. And just when you thought things couldn't get any more disappointing, the second biggest show of the year, SummerSlam. This was the 20th annual SummerSlam. The co-main event is the Great Khali versus Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship. Why the did I think this show was decent for 17 years? Listen, I'm not trying to be funny or extra or whatever, but Great Khali versus Batista might be the worst match I've seen in my life. I am not kidding. This is worse than Mabel versus Diesel. But at least this wasn't the main event. The Great Khali cannot move. Not only like physically can he not move, he can't do any moves except for squeeze and punch. I can't believe that these idiots actually had the Great Khali main eventing in '07. I can't believe they had him as the World Heavyweight Champion. That just shows how down bad they were in the summer of '07. And you know what? I can't believe I technically paid money for a Khali title defense on pay-per-view. And you know what the worst part is about this match? It sucks, it's horrible, my dead grandma moves more than the Great Khali, all that, like, it sucks, we all know that. The worst part is, it ends in a DQ. If there was ever a time to just shut up and be like, alright man, just have the fans go home happy a little bit, let's have a clean finish, it was this. But no, Great Khali is out here hitting Batista with a chair. What are we doing? I know the roster was cooked in the summer of '07, but you're telling me that Khali was the only option? I swear Festus would have been a better option at this point. This show is bad, it is really bad, and it's crazy to me how under the radar this show is, unless I just live under a rock, like I'm Patrick or something. I can't believe I went 17 years of my life just like, yeah, SummerSlam '07 was decent, yeah, it was a good pay-per-views, whatever. No, this is horrible. And nobody has ever talked about this show for like any debate or conversation to ever spark. It's like people just pretend this show never existed. And I see why. It's funny, as a kid, you're so excited to watch any pay-per-view. You'll make any show you ordered as a kid mean something to you. You'll make any show good for you in that time because, you know, you feel special for watching it, for ordering it. But looking back at it, the only good thing on this show was genuinely the main event. Cena vs. Orton was awesome in every way. It lived up to everything it was supposed to be, especially as a kid. Even watching it now, it's everything I want a Cena vs. Orton match to be. That is the only thing that saves this show. Even a tiny bit. But damn, like what the hell was this show? Like I get it, it was injuries and everything, it's not really their fault, everyone got injured, it is what it is, but it's like damn, they couldn't have cooked up anything else. This was a huge trip to look back at because, like I said, for a long time I thought this show was decent. I watched it, I had a decent time in 07, and I just went the rest of my life like, yeah, that was a good show. No, it wasn't. And once again, it's crazy to me how 540,000 people ordered this show. More people ordered this show than SummerSlam 08, SummerSlam 09, SummerSlam 2010. This was a very successful show, and that to me, it's crazy. These are easily the worst SummerSlams of all time, and they belong here, no doubt about it. And it kind of shows how at the end of the day though, despite these being bad and these are the worst SummerSlams of all time, compared to some other shows, they aren't that bad, and it kind of just shows how SummerSlam has been pretty consistent over the years. What tripped me out was technically the worst SummerSlam on Cage match is actually 2021, and then these two followed up, and I'm like, 2021 wasn't a good SummerSlam, it was pretty whatever, it was average, but worst? No way that's the worst SummerSlam of all time. I think there's been a lot of really average SummerSlams, and what sucks is a lot of those shows could have been really good if just like 1 or 2 matches were done better or had better decisions. It's like 2010 SummerSlam wasn't that bad, it's just the ending kind of puts a bad taste in everyone's mouth. I think back to like 2016, if Randy and Brock just have a really good match, no one's thinking back to this show with that many negative feelings. Same with 2017, the show had a lot of bangers. It's just we had 15 minutes of Jinder Mahal versus Nakamura, which just stinks up the whole show. But regardless, it's pretty interesting how SummerSlam over almost 40 years has always been pretty consistent. It doesn't really have the lows as some other Survivor Series or WrestleMania have. In the comments down below though, let me know, in your opinion, what is your least favorite SummerSlam? What is a SummerSlam that you just despise, a SummerSlam you hate, a SummerSlam that you ordered maybe and you regretted it, or a SummerSlam you watched on the network and you're just like, that was a total waste of time? Let me know down below. Also, let me know down below if you guys enjoyed the trip to the 90s. First time going back to the 90s on the channel, I'd love to do it more, but just let me know if that's what you want to see. It's your boy Pav, aka Wrestling Gifts. I'll see you guys soon with the next one. Till then though, take it easy. Later guys.